I got my shirt today, Far Above Rubies, and we are talking about the 10 Commandments. And my commandment is going to be the 8th commandment. You can read about all of the commandments of God throughout the entire Bible, but the 10 Commandments of God are in Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 17, also in Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 6 through 17, and I'm only going to be talking about one, but just to give some background, the first 4 commands are in regard to your relationship with God. The last 6 are regarding your relationship with your fellow man. These commandments were given by God to Moses, who became his mouthpiece for the people. And Moses instructed and led them. And so by the divine and supernatural instruction of God, in fact, it was so supernatural that God emblazoned these commands, these 10 commands, on tablets, and Moses brought them back to the people. And there's more to that story, so I hope that you will dive into Exodus and read about it. But we're just going to talk about the one command. And I want to make this note here that even though many people think that the 10 Commandments are the be-all and end-all of God's law, there are many instructions from God and commands throughout the entire Bible, Old and New Testament, and all are sacred and necessary to keep. And Jesus said in the New Testament, in Matthew, you can read chapter 22, 36 through 40, Jesus said he didn't come to do away with the law, but he came to fulfill it. He even added some depth to it. In one example, this isn't the command that I'm discussing, but it's one of the 10 commandments. And just as an example, he said, "Thou shalt not kill," was in the law. But he said that if you hate a man in your heart, that you have committed murder. So it's like heart murder. But with that in mind of how Jesus said how important it was and went beyond, I want to discuss this commandment, the 8th commandment, thou shalt not steal. All Exodus 20 and verse 15 says is, thou shalt not steal. So how could we expound on that? Well, the definition of steal is take another person's property without permission or legal right and without intending to return it. It's theft, it's robbery. And the Bible talks about a need for restitution. If you have ever taken something from someone, you need to make it up to them. You need to pay it back. And the literal meaning of the word steal, if we wanted to be ever so careful as to be certain not to break this command, we could, as an example, we could be extra careful, not like we're stealing from a grocery store, but we need to think about all of our actions. And an example is we might feel that it's okay to use supplies from our employer because we see them stocked in abundance, and most likely many bosses, they won't care if you take a few pens or use the copier and use the paper off the ream. But it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, if you have 100 employees and that's 100 pens and that's, 500 copies, and that's, it sort of adds up. And, most likely, most bosses are going to say, oh yeah, they kind of factor that in, that the supplies will be used, the sticky notes and things like that get taken home or whatever. But if you ask, you are going to be standing out above and beyond other people who just take it for granted and do it. You have made yourself different because you have avoided even looking like you were stealing by asking. And my husband, he was ever so careful not to use company time for his personal business. And his boss, when he was a contractor for the company that he became an employee of, would watch him. And he saw that he would come right back to work and everybody else would just take their time. But my husband would be back on the site working after the lunch period. And so his boss hired him as an actual employee, not just a contractor. And that job, it was such a blessing to our family, and it provided for our 5 children throughout their growing up and even into my husband's retirement. So I am telling you, there are blessings that go with obeying God's commands. And he even says that in his word. If then, you do this and I do that. And if you do opposite of his command, there are reapings to that. And so we can be prayerful and ask God to never let us justify stealing in any way, and let us always have a good conscience. And another way that we could expand on that command, and we're not adding to the Bible, but we are going to the extreme of not stealing, is that since stealing is taking, we could make an effort to be a giving person. Many times someone comes to my house and they like something of mine, and I'm like, it's yours. Or in my mind, I think they liked it, and now I know what I'm getting them for their birthday. And I'll get them an identical one if I can afford to give it, or if I don't need the item, then I'll just give them right then, just take it. And so it is better to give than to receive. And the Bible says, thou shalt not steal. So we don't want to take. And I'm just saying, I want to bless others and not take from them. And so I'm suggesting that maybe you copy that idea if you feel it, and if you're capable. It's better to give than to receive. Thou shalt not steal. So instead of taking, practice giving and be blessed. God bless you today.